Detective Explainer here. Today, I'm going to explain a docudrama thriller film called Stanford Prison Experiment, which is based on a true story. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Stanford University posted an advertisement asking for male college students who will participate in a psychological study of prison life. They're paying $15 a day for 1 to 2 weeks. The study is called the Stanford Prison Experiment. After assessing the potential candidate's emotional state and inclination for aggression, the researchers use a coin flip to decide on whether the participant will be a guard or a prisoner. An orientation is then held for the guard group. The superintendent, Dr. Phil Zimbardo, introduces himself as a psychology professor at Stanford University. The experiment is part of his research on the effects prisons have on human behavior, and he explains that they will be using Stanford's faculty offices as prison cells while a hallway will serve as the prison yard. After reminding them that attacking prisoners is prohibited, he gives the men sunglasses and uniforms to give the prisoners the impression that they have a singular unit of authority. From this point on, they're to take the study seriously and never refer to it as an experiment again. Day 1 of the Stanford Prison Experiment has begun. In an office, Dr. Zimbardo and his graduate staff, Mike, Kyle, and Paul, watch the experiment unfold through a surveillance television. A man comes into the room, and Dr. Zimbardo introduces him as Jesse Fletcher, who they'll be consulting with throughout the study. A guard takes one of the prisoners named Daniel to a mirror. There, Daniel sees that he's wearing a nude cap and a dress. The guard tells him that from now on, he will be known as Prisoner 8612 and that he will refer to them as correctional officers. Daniel tries to stay casual about it, but the guard sternly straightens him out before amusedly taking him to his cell. Daniel, Jeff, and Peter share a cell, and the three of them are talking when the guard calls them to line up. All the prisoners line up in the hall while the guard lays down all their rules. In the surveillance office, Mike is getting ready for his role as the warden. Dr. Zimbardo asks him to tell the guards to lighten up, but Fletcher advises against it. During mealtime, prisoner 5704 asks the guard for a smoke, so he gives him a cigarette. But before the prisoner could smoke, Christopher takes the cigarette from him and smokes it himself. With a tough guy act and a phony southern accent, he casually tells the prisoner that smoking is a privilege he has to earn. Though the prisoner tries to reason that the contract allows them to smoke, Christopher doesn't hear them out. He goes to the prisoner's table to warn them that he doesn't want any more talking. Daniel tries to joke about how he thinks he's John Wayne, but suddenly, Christopher slams his baton against the table and coldly singles Daniel out. For the prisoners' next activity, Christopher has them all lined up and makes them say their prisoner number, which he calls their names loud and clear. Each time someone isn't loud, fast, or clear, or whenever someone messes up or looks down to check their number, they have to start over again. Eventually, he makes some prisoners recite other prisoners' numbers, and when they're unable to, Christopher orders them to do push-ups. Afterwards, Christopher asks if everyone enjoyed their counts, and Daniel crossly replies that he didn't. In response, Christopher has the guards forcefully take him to the hole, which is a dark, small, and confining closet. In the guards' rooms, some of the guards laugh at Christopher's power tripping while some look uncomfortable about it. One of them asks if the prisoners just do as he says, and Christopher, who's dropped his southern accent, happily tells him that they do. Amused, the guard muses about giving Daniel extra attention that night. While the prisoners are sleeping, the guards suddenly wake them up and make them go to the hall to put their hands on the wall. The guard announces that it's exercise period, and he makes them do 40 push-ups and jumping jacks. Though the prisoners are clearly agitated and worn out, they comply. When Peter finishes, he stands up, stone-faced as he insists that he's already done. The guard orders everyone to keep doing their push-ups until Peter joins them. Peter spitefully yields, but not without calling the guard a fascist pig. Affronted, the guard aggressively orders his fellow guards to put Peter in the hole. The prisoners are instructed to make their beds, while the guard follow through on what he said about giving a very jittery Daniel extra attention. He asks him if he made his bed, and when Daniel said he did, the guard ruins it, telling him that he didn't. Daniel snaps, and he grabs the guard to slam him against the wall. Without warning, he hits Daniel's face with his baton, spurring unease from the guards and prisoners alike. Realizing that he broke protocol, the guard frantically starts commanding the others to put Daniel in the hole. There, Daniel talks about how it felt good to fight back. When Peter expresses his reluctance, Daniel convinces him to help get the other prisoners on their side. There are only 3 guards at a given time, while there are 9 prisoners. Daniel thinks that the odds are in their favor. It's day 2 of the Stanford Prison Experiment, and the prisoners are eating. There's an oppressive air around them, and they all look on edge. Prisoner 5486 looks particularly stressed, and he doesn't move when the guard instructs them to wash their plates and head back. When questioned, he hesitantly asserts that he's not going until he gets his glasses. The guard makes the others get him, but since 5, 4, 8, 6 wouldn't budge, he roughly grabs him and drags him to the hole. Finally, the researchers wake Dr. Zimbardo up to show him the footage. Zimbardo seems intrigued by this. And when Kyle asks if they should step in, Zimbardo tells them to see where it goes. Though Kyle reasons that things are taking a turn for the worse, Zimbardo remains unmoved. Finally, the prisoners are let out of the hole and Peter discovers that he has a new cell assignment. With his two cellmates feeling desperate for cigarettes and vitamins, Peter tells them about what he and Daniel talked about in the hole. When the guards come to check on them again, they see that Peter's cell is barred while their prisoner number patches are all cut up in front of their cell. Upon noticing this, Daniel starts calling out in support of Peter's revolution. The guards report the incident to Zimbardo, but the professor chides them for losing order in his prison. He reminds them that they have all the authority and that they're stronger than the prisoners. Since the prisoners are forming bonds with each other, Zimbardo slyly tells the guards to break them up. Before leaving, he adds that they should call for backup if they need to. When the guards return, there are several more of them, and they forcibly take all the prisoners' beds away from them. Danielle and his cellmates try to resist, but the prisoners from Cell 3 are more compliant, upsetting Danielle. While the other researchers grow uncomfortable as they watch, Zimbardo looks amused and satisfied with the outcome. A guard instructs Jeff to put his cap back on, but Jeff is adamant about disobeying him. As a result, the guards get him down to tie him up. After everything, the guards have given the members of Cell 3 a decent meal, complete with soda and sandwiches. Right in the middle of the hallway. They even give 5486's glasses back. Using the three men, the guards make an example to show what good behavior will get the prisoners there. Back in his cell, Daniel uses a screw to get the doors lock off. He and 7258 make a run for it, and they even manage to pass the guards' quarters, catching a guard's attention. The two make it to the exit, only to find that every door in the hall is locked. In no time at all, both the guards and the researchers arrive, and the guards capture Daniel and 7258, forcing them to face the wall. The guards are ripping Daniel and 7258's dresses off, while the two are begging them to stop. With the two men naked now, the guards shove Daniel back in the hole for being a terrible influence on all the other prisoners, while Peter is forced to stay in a different cell with the still tied up Jeff. Later, Christopher visits Peter's cell and uses a fire extinguisher on the men, overwhelming them and allowing the guards to finally open their door. In the hole, Daniel is growing more and more unraveled. He desperately screams about needing a doctor, the warden, or someone, even yelling about how messed up he feels inside. He shrieks that he's burning up inside, then begs repeatedly to be let out while the guards and prisoners could only listen. Later, Daniel is sat on a chair in front of Fletcher and all the researchers. He weakly stammers about having a stomachache and a headache, so Fletcher yells out, calling crap on what he's saying. When Fletcher says that he's weak, not sick, Daniel tries telling him that he doesn't know what it's like there. This sets Fletcher off, and he storms over to Daniel, asking him if he has the right to tell someone who's served 17 years of hard time that he doesn't know what he's like to be there. Daniel grows meek, and after Fletcher finishes antagonizing him, Zimbardo asks Daniel what the real problem is. On the verge of tears, he says that the guards are going overboard, to which Zimbardo retorts that he brought that upon himself. Finally, Daniel admits that he wants to get out of there, and Zimbardo simply recommends that he fight less so he wouldn't be so tired. Daniel tries to get a word in, but Zimbardo sharply tells him not to interrupt him. Daniel timidly apologizes, and Zimbardo subtly berates him for not being able to handle some push-ups and some guys calling him names. Still, he says that he'll ask the guards to go easy on him, and with that, the guards take Daniel away. As the researchers go, Mike asks Zimbardo if he'll really tell the guards to go easy on him, and Zimbardo rejects the very idea, claiming that Daniel was faking. When Daniel's made to line up with the other prisoners, he goes on a heated tirade about how this is all real and that this isn't an experiment. He yells when the guards try touching him, then storms off to the camera to yell at it. He curses the researchers out, repeatedly shouting that they have no right to screw with his head while Mike and Kyle watch the hysterical man threaten to beat up everyone. Day 3 comes, and Mike and Kyle explain to Zimbardo that they had to let Daniel go last night. This angers Zimbardo, and though Kyle tries reasoning that the contract allows them to leave, Zimbardo doesn't hear him out. Incredulous, he asked them all if they understand how much time and resources were spent just for them to tamper with the integrity of the enterprise. He only calms down when Mike reveals that Daniel wanted a lawyer, and Zimbardo is left to wonder what they missed in the screening process. As an argument brews about what happened, Zimbardo calmly interjects that the point of the matter is, the only thing separating a prisoner like Daniel and a guard like Christopher was a coin flip. Later in the surveillance room, Kyle calls Zimbardo and plays the tape from Jeff in 7258. They talk about Daniel, and 7258 insists that he's sure that Daniel's home and not in maximum security like the guards claim he is. He says that the breakdown was some jive acting and that Daniel will be back because they made a deal that if either of them makes it out, they'll bust the others out. Zimbardo is surprised to hear this, but Mike calls his attention to let him know that the prisoner's visitors are there. After visiting hours, Zimbardo approaches his colleagues and instructs them to up the security tonight. When they don't seem enthusiastic about it, he reminds them of Daniel's plan to bust everyone else out. Though they recommend Zimbardo to rest tonight, he rudely insists on sitting guard. While Zimbardo's on guard duty, a co-professor politely questions him about his methods and variables, but this only offends Zimbardo, who cuts their conversation short. Later, when he goes to the office, Mike informs him that Kyle's gone because he had a death in the family. Zimbardo curses about how that could not have come at a worse time, troubling Mike. By day 4, Peter starts to crack, thinking that he can't last another night there. When it's mealtime, Peter stays in his cell, and when his request to see a doctor is ignored, he screams into a pillow and starts ripping into it. A priest speaks with each of the prisoners while Zimbardo takes notes during their exchange. When it's Peter's turn to be called, the guards see that he's made a mess of the pillow feathers in his cell. The priest asks if Peter's contacted a lawyer, and Peter says that he has an uncle who's a lawyer, so the priest encourages him to call. Meanwhile, a guard makes all the prisoners chant that Peter or prisoner 819 did a bad thing loudly and repeatedly so Peter could hear them from the room where he and the priest spoke in. With the incessant chanting, Peter starts screaming, his hands clutching at his head. Peter is in tears as he wails over how he isn't a bad prisoner, forcing Zimbardo to let him leave. Back in the hallway, Mike demands to know why Zimbardo did that, and Zimbardo makes it clear that he can't handle any more talk involving lawyers. During day 5, Zimbardo's girlfriend, Dr. Christina Moslick, heads to the surveillance room. She and Zimbardo share a kiss, and she volunteers to take Kyle's place on the parole board. During mealtime, a new prisoner has joined them. Prisoner 416 has lost his appetite from the bucket of feces nearby, so when a guard tells him to eat, he politely refuses. As a result, he gets put in the hole. The guard drops his plate there, makes him pick the sausages up, and tells him that he's not leaving until he eats the sausages. In a meeting with the researchers, Jeff meekly requests for parole so he can spend his 23rd birthday with his friends as it's his last year at Stanford. He even pretends that the prison is treating him well. In turn, Fletcher berates him, antagonizes him over imaginary charges, and uses said charges to paint a picture of him being unfit to take part in regular society. Zimbardo joins in, egging Jeff on until he's brought to tears, and Zimbardo has him taken away. But before he leaves, Christina, who's been watching everything unfold with a perturbed expression, asks if he'll give up his prison salary in exchange for parole, and Jeff wholeheartedly says he would. During their meeting, Mike points out that Jeff looks ready to break, but Zimbardo refuses to grant him the parole since it would show the other prisoners that they just need to do some talking to be let go. When he asks Fletcher for his opinion, Fletcher says that he just reenacted everything that was done to them. Suddenly, he seems choked up, so he leaves the room with Zimbardo following him. At that point, Fletcher wants out. He hates himself now, he became everything he hated, and he enjoyed it. Zimbardo asks him to stay, and with a pleading look on his face, Fletcher requests Jeff to be paroled for it. With a tight smile, Zimbardo agrees. Christopher turns up for his shift, and as he's walking down the hall, he sees Paul taking Jeff out. After wearing a look of annoyance, he goes to the guards' quarters and tells his colleagues to make it a night to remember. They open up the hole to antagonize 416, who still hasn't eaten his sausages. Finally, 416 tells him that no one there is treating the prisoners like human beings, and the guards and experimenters are violating the rules set up for the experiment. After 416 declared that he won't endorse an unfair system, Christopher makes a show of losing it. He yells at him, asking if he expected to be taken to nursery school after breaking the law. Slamming the door shut, he shouts that he's not going anywhere until he eats the sausages, and his fellow guard laughs as they walk away. As Christina is about to enter the elevator, she sees the guards with Christopher in the lead marching the prisoners to their respective buckets for bathroom time, all while the inmates have bags over their heads. Though she looks perturbed by the cruel treatment, Zimbardo smiles at her, asking her how incredible this is. Christina leaves and Zimbardo chases after her. When he asks her what's wrong, Christina finally confronts him about how messed up the study is and how they're dealing with kids who never committed a crime in their lives. She reminds him that all of them begged to leave, and when she wondered what they're so afraid of, she realized that they're afraid of Zimbardo. Affronted, Zimbardo retorts that she's not looking at this like a psychologist and that she's not going to cut it in their field or she's going to get so emotional over some basic procedure. When Christina gets offended, Zimbardo tries to tell her that she, of all people, should understand what he tapped into in his prison. Christina calls him out for being sewn over his head that he's calling this his prison. She stresses that he's not dealing with prisoners, subjects, or students, but boys that he's harming, so he needs to fix his mess now. After everything, Zimbardo just defiantly asks her if she's finished, and when Christina walks away, Zimbardo doesn't stop her. With that, he hurriedly returns to watch what's happening, and he finds the guards doubling down on tormenting the prisoners. Christopher makes 7,258 in 2093 pretend to be Frankenstein in The Bride of Frankenstein. And when 7,258's forced to get close and tell 2093 he loves him, he almost cries. Then, Christopher quietly asks 2093 why he's such an obedient but kissing homeless boy before getting the hole open to reveal a still quietly resistant 416. He makes 2093 crassly tell 416 that he's going to beat him up, but 2093 finally objects, not wanting to speak profanities. Being the more reluctant of the three, the blonde guard advises 2093 to just tell 416 that he'll kick him in his end, and 2093 readily approaches 416 to comply. Unsatisfied, Christopher and the ponytail guard torment 2093 for not meaning what he said, while the blonde guard has had enough of everything and moves away from them. Christopher's unwilling to let 2093 go, so he backs him against a wall, continually forcing him to say a bad word. Despite all the yelling, the insults, and the fearmongering, 2093 remains subservient while firmly refuses to use profane language no matter what Christopher tries to do. Left with no other options, Christopher holds the other prisoners hostage, casually telling them that they're not getting any sleep until 2093 says what he wants him to say. Eventually, 2093 meets him halfway. With a resolved yet uncomfortable expression, he mentions the profane word, but only while declaring that he shall not say it with any meaning. Smug and satisfied, Christopher punishes 2093 for swearing and orders him to do 10 push-ups, which 2093 thanks him for before getting to it. The ponytail guard places his foot on 2093's back, telling him to start his push-ups over again, but Christopher has a better idea. He makes 5,704 and 4,325 sit on 2093's back. With the insurmountable load on his back, 2093 tries to do one push-up, but he breaks, falling on the floor and sobbing. All the while, Zimbardo watches intently with an increasingly perturbed expression, as if realizing what a mess everything is. Then, Christopher has the prisoners line up again, calling them male and female camels and making them hump each other to show 2093 how to mate. Unable to refuse their order, the prisoners hump their fellow prisoners with a blank look. While prisoner 416 sings The Amazing Grace after being forced by Christopher. While the guard's reign of terror continues, Zimbardo could only stew in horror and regret after seeing what he's done and encouraged. Finally, he steps out of the office and into the hall, where he yells at the guards to catch their attention. When they all look at him, Zimbardo weakly says that the experiment is over, terminated. He almost looks like he's going to cry when he has to repeat it, and after the prisoners stare blankly at him, they finally start showing relief. As for Christopher, he breaks out of character at the flip of a switch, then asks if they're not getting paid for the full 2 weeks. The Stanford prisoner experiment was terminated on August 20, 1971, after only 6 days. 2 months later, the guards and prisoners were interviewed. A guard stated that it was easy to say that you wouldn't have acted like he did, but you wouldn't know. Now he knows what he's capable of, and it hurts him. Daniel and Christopher also share an interview, and Daniel still looks shaken up. He claims that the whole experience continues to harm him, and he remains troubled that people could be as vile as their guards were. He knows that Christopher's a nice guy, but he hates him because he knows what he can turn into. In turn, Christopher says that he didn't see what he was doing as harmful. It was degrading, but it was part of his own personal experiment to see what kind of verbal abuse people can take before objecting. He started to abuse everyone so much, he got so profane, but people never said a thing. As a result of the experiment, Dr. Phil Zimbardo shifted his focus to educating others about the psychology of authority and the abuse of power. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.